Good afternoon, everyone. I had the pleasure of presenting a very similar presentation yesterday, and I made the comment that it was bad talking about insurance before lunch, and I find myself today talking about insurance after lunch. So if you fall asleep, please don't make a noise. So I don't think we need to spend too long thinking about the setting the scene, understanding where we are. We've heard today from much more clever people than myself about what is available, what is being attached to our vessels and our onshore operations to monitor, observe, feedback, give information. Clearly, all of this connectivity, whether it's in our shore-based operations or at sea, is increasing the risk profile of our businesses. And we've also talked about the awareness of cyber and maybe the potential lack of take-up of cyber assessment, which obviously my colleague here will talk about. And perhaps that's due to the fact that shipping is maybe a bit behind some of the other industries. If you look at aerospace and airlines, they've been fairly early adopters of a lot more of the Internet of Things, and so perhaps their awareness and therefore their appetite for dealing with these things has grown a bit more. But I'm the insurance guy, so I'm going to talk to you about insurance. I'm going to quickly talk about what cyber insurance is, what it can deal with, the types of things, perhaps some of the exclusions that exist in policies that you may be in the back of your mind relying on already. And I suppose because I'm the insurance guy, I'm going to challenge everything that's insurable. So all these people that have talked to you all today about all their fancy systems and what they can do, you also need to kind of check with them before you buy anything from them. What about their insurance? Will their insurance respond adequately if it's their system that infects yours? Okay. There's lots of stories about insurance cyber attacks in the world at large. Probably the most recent is Marriott hotels, which obviously was a big data breach. And in the shipping world, obviously, the big one is the NotPetya attack, which was 2017, which affected Maersk. But also it affected another big part of the supply chain, which was FedEx, the TNT operation. And it's perhaps less widely quoted, but the Maersk attack allegedly was $300 million. The FedEx exposure was, I think, about 400. So there's some big numbers out there. And last year we had the attack or the incident, I suppose, with Costco, which was Long Beach, California, and then into their enterprise from there. So there's some good examples. There's lots of smaller examples. My colleagues Mark and Cynthia and other people in the industry know of other situations that are occurring on a much smaller scale. The last comment's valid, which is that insurance isn't the only answer. As I said to the audience yesterday, my big stance is you must do assessment before you come to the insurers and think about insurance. Don't just come and want to buy insurance, because actually the insurers will look less favourably on you if you haven't gone through some kind of mitigation process first. So what is it? What's cyber insurance? Well, I suppose it's just another insurance policy, isn't it? I think it might have been Paul actually yesterday that talked about cyber as being just another risk that we have to manage in our enterprise. And that's probably right. It is just another risk. I suppose the only difference is, unlike, say, a hull and machinery insurance policy, that the cyber risk is evolving all the time. So you might kind of go through a process and tick a box and say, okay, well, we've done that, but you haven't done it because next week it's different and it's evolved into something else. So it's that continual process, hence my point about assessment. So in cyber insurance at the moment is relatively in its infancy in terms of insurance. So the insurance world, as you know, is probably notoriously slow in sort of catching up to what's required out there. And I speak disparagingly, but I think it is quite slow in the way it's approached itself to cyber. So we've got, as I say, some key aspects of insurance. As always, it's to deal with your property damage to the assets, and then the effect on the business, so the kind of business interruption aspect. And the bottom comment I've made about the Lloyd's code. So Lloyd's insurance, as you know, is the origination often of a lot of these new insurances. And so they've got two distinct codes which they use for the development of new policies, the CY and the CZ. And the CY is to do with data breach and the extraction of data. And then the CZ is the property damage. And that just helps you to understand, if it's a so what. So that helps you to understand that they are actually taking this quite seriously now. So they're spending a lot more time thinking about how they build new products to deal with it. So do you need it? Do you need cyber insurance? Well, as Cynthia said, there's some regulation out there. We've got IMO 2021 coming, which will at least ensure that there is a cyber strategy on board vessels, which is great. But yeah, I mean, absolutely. As with all insurance, do you need it? Well, no, you don't need it. You don't have to have it. It's your choice. Your choice as consumers. So again, my strong advice is if you've got a suitable mitigation strategy, then you don't need to buy insurance. If you accept that you've got a risk, quantified risk of this amount, and you decide, well, actually we want to accept that internally, we'll just take the risk and self-insure. That's fantastic. I think my issue, Colin used a slide earlier of the ostrich approach, and I think that's valid. So it's okay to do nothing as long as you know you're doing nothing. So it's a positive stance. We're not doing anything. And the middle part of the slide is probably the most important one for you, because a lot of people will say, yeah, we've already got that covered. We've got policies in place. My P&I will deal with it. My property insurance, my crime policy, we've got IT policies. And as you know, with insurance, that's not necessarily true. We like to keep our lawyer friends busy by having certain ambiguity within our policy wording. So you just need to be confident. And the challenge for the shipping industry is, of course, insurance likes things to be kind of neat and tidy, so they like to deal with onshore risk, offshore risk. What they struggle with is where the things overlap. So that's the challenge for the insurance world. Bottom comment is. It's quite true also that hope is not a strategy. I won't get attacked. The phrase I think I said yesterday, the phrase attack is I feel the wrong one, because NotPetya wasn't an attack per se. It was malware, ransomware that was out there. If you had a computer that hadn't been updated, you got it. So if it's perhaps the wrong word, because I think a lot of these things are just where people perhaps haven't prioritised IT updates. Let me tell you, at Maersk now, you can get any IT update through the board. Anything you want from an IT perspective gets signed off immediately because of the action following the incident. Okay, so quick example. So we'll take the risk. This is a real example. This is a client in the US who notified us as their broker that they had an incident. It was a Thursday. It was a phone conversation with the guy who looks after their account, and he was in his car and he was talking to the risk manager, and she said, "Oh, well, by the way, we seem to have had a cyber incident." No big deal. Everything will be all right. By Friday morning, it was a bit critical, and they'd lost all functionality in the business, and they couldn't trade. And they said, "We will be, in serious trouble if we don't get this sorted by the end of the day. We've got, vessels going here and there, and we need to manage them. We have no access to do that." So they engage with a remediation firm, which is typical. So the post-breach wording that Cynthia just told you. Engage with the remediation firm. They very quickly, these firms do work very quickly. They'll sign agreements with you, and then they'll get into the system and deal with the breach and remedy it. And so kind of over the weekend, it was all very, very speedily dealt with, and now they're into that sort of post-breach updating and safeguarding the systems. My point is that they didn't have insurance. So those costs being relatively minor, I think the final cost is way higher than that. But that they've paid that money. So go back to the same example. My comment on NotPetya with Maersk and FedEx. Maersk didn't have insurance in place. FedEx did. Funnily enough, the same piece of malware also affected Mondelez. Do you know Mondelez? Confectionery company. They're now suing their insurer Zurich the stance that Zurich took afterwards. So it's got to be really clear on whether your policies are covered. As I said, there's a few exclusions. This is the small print, so I've kind of deliberately made it small because it's the small print. So these are the current exclusions that sit out there. So you might say, well, everything's covered under my hull policy. Well, there's an exclusion clause under a hull and machinery policy called CL380, which is a cyber liability exclusion. So if it's on your policy wording, then you don't have cyber cover for the ships, so the physical damage to the ships. Some brokers will help you buy that back. You can buy these exclusions back for an additional premium. A lot of people just say my cyber is all covered through the P&I. If anything happens to my vessel and it's and it does some damage to something else, then the P&I will cover it. And unfortunately, with P&I think are brilliant at most things. With cyber, they've kind of neither excluded it or included it, so it's a bit grey. The sort of perceived wisdom is that if anything did happen, they would react, but there's a question mark over whether it's covered in the reinsurance layer. So that if things get out of hand and the costs escalate to a very large level, there's a potential problem. You might have property insurance, you might have commercial crime insurances. They often have exclusions for war. So if the incident is deemed to have been an act of war by somebody or terrorism, then that tends to be excluded. And if you've got any D&O, some people think it's covered under a D&O policy, and that's not directors and office insurance. That's not the case. So what would you be insuring? So what do cyber policies cover? This is the type of things they cover. So on the top you've got the insured terminology, and then underneath you've got the different aspects of your business that would be dealt with as a result of insuring. Okay, so what cover's available? So this is what's out there. There is something like $150 million of limit. We've just negotiated that with insurers. So you can get about $150 million of marine insurance. There's onshore cyber insurance has got slightly higher limits, but it's relatively new. The insurers are recognising that the marine industry is catching up, and so they're starting to provide the policies. Obviously, as people start to buy them, as you get into that, then they'll probably increase the limits. Okay, some specialist providers, some of the larger insurance companies, DNK, obviously you have cover for vessels if you're entered with them. But my parting shot is do the risk assessment first. I can't tell you not to spend money in insurance, otherwise I get fired. But the reality is, if you have money that you are thinking of putting into insurance, you should do the risk assessment first. Get that bit done. Your exposure may be a lot lower than you think it is, maybe a lot higher, but at least you spent the money wisely. Thanks very much.